Hey guys, this is Coach Pritchard here, and we're just going to go through just basically the high points of your notes for this week. This week we're looking at just the basic components of fitness. So we spent a lot of time talking about nutrition, and now we're going to look at the other aspects. So I told you that any type of weight management plan, whether you want to lose weight or gain weight, to be effective really has to take into account the nutrition side and the physical activity side. It's very, very difficult, if not impossible, for me to be successful in a plan just by dieting, just by looking at the nutrition side. And the same is true on the other side. I can't just, meet my goal or my target of losing X amount of pounds unless it's very small. If it's a substantial goal, I can't really achieve that by just exercising. So, for example, I'm going to eat whatever I want. I'll just exercise more. Well, nobody was going to exercise that much. I mean, it would take us very, very substantial amount of exercise to accomplish that. And the same true, like I mentioned, on the diet side. So you need a healthy balance. So we're going to look at the physical activity side this week and talk about the basic components of fitness. I'm just going to hit the major highlights, and I think the things that are covered in your test. You won't have a test until next week. I'll post that next week. But just looking at some highlights here, I was talking about the basic components of fitness, and you can follow along in the PowerPoint that I've attached to your Google Classroom. But there's 5 basic components of fitness. The first is body composition. So we've talked about this a little bit, but body composition is just the ratio of your body fat to your lean muscle tissue. Okay, so boiling that down to simple terms, it's just fat versus muscle, and how is your body composed? That's where the body composition comes from. Okay, the second is flexibility. So flexibility is the ability to move a body part through a full range of motion. Okay, and I think there's a question on your test that asks, can you measure total body flexibility? In other words, can I say you're flexible or you're not? You may have heard somebody say something like that before, and that can be a very general comment, but in reality, I can't make a blanket statement of whether you're flexible or not, because this is why, and it's an answer on your test. Flexibility is specific to each joint. So for example, if I had torn a rotator cuff in my right shoulder and I might be able to only raise my arm this high, well, my flexibility here is very low, very minimal. But my left shoulder, again, the ability to move a body part through a full range of motion, I may be able to completely move my left arm all the way around. Great flexibility here, very limited flexibility here. So I can't just say, yes, you're flexible, or no, you're not. It's specific to each joint in your body. And as you know, your body consists of a lot of joints. So flexibility, again, is specific to each joint. The third component is muscle strength. Okay, and the easiest way to think about muscle strength is the amount of force that a muscle can exert. Okay, and we're talking about just one time. So how much weight can I lift one time? How much strength is there in the muscle that I'm trying to use, whether that be a bicep, whether that be a quadricep or a hamstring in my leg. Muscle strength is the amount of force that muscle can exert just one time. Okay, fourth is muscle endurance. So it's the opposite of muscle strength in terms of it's how much can my muscle do, what kind of physical task can my muscle do over a long period of time without becoming fatigued or tired. So I like to think of muscle strength and muscle endurance in terms of the weight room. It's the easiest way to think about it. And so muscle strength would be, let's say that you lay down and you're going to do a bench press. Okay, so just a flat bar, pressing it up. Muscle strength is how much weight can I do one time? What's the maximum amount of weight that I can press? Okay, that would be muscle strength. Muscle endurance would be, okay, I'm going to put a set amount of weight on the bar, and how many times can I do it before I fail? Okay, that's muscle endurance. So the difference is muscle strength, just a one time, how much can I press? Muscle endurance, how many times can I do this activity before I cannot do it anymore? Okay, and then the last is cardiorespiratory endurance. And just the definition of that, it's the ability of the heart, lungs, and blood vessels to send fuel and oxygen to the body's tissues during long periods of vigorous activity. So for example, if I'm running 3 miles today, my heart and my lungs and my blood vessels all have to work together to send fuel, okay, and oxygen, which creates fuel, to my body's muscles in order for me to continue to do the activity. Okay, and obviously cardiorespiratory endurance is going to be measured in terms of how efficient am I at that activity. So in other words, if I'm running the 3 miles, how fast can I complete it? Okay, so I'm going to deem that my cardiorespiratory endurance is better the faster that I can run. The slower that I can run, that component of fitness is going to be measured as weaker or lower. Okay, so those are the 5 again. Just go through those: body composition, flexibility, muscle strength, muscle endurance, and cardiorespiratory endurance. And so how do I measure those? That's another test question, and I've got a slide just for that. Body composition we can do a couple different ways. If you wanted to be super advanced, they do something they call underwater weighing, but you would have to go to, say, a Vanderbilt or probably some kind of big physical institution to do that. Skin fold caliper, if you go into a doctor, probably doesn't happen anymore as much with the increase in technology, but skin fold caliper is just a way that they can measure fat at different points or locations in your body. They add all those up, and they can determine relatively closely what your overall body fat percentage is. Bioelectrical impedance is probably most common, and so if you happen to have a weight scale at home that will tell you your body fat percentage, it probably has some metal pads or rings that you step on when you get onto the scale, and in order to measure the body composition, you have to step on it barefoot. And what's happening is that your body basically becomes a circuit, and so it's going to send a small electrical shock through your body, okay, and it's going to go all the way through your body and come back to the scale. So they make some scales that you stand on like you may have at home. They also make some that you can hold, and they've got metal rings that you hold on to. But your body becomes a circuit. The electrical shock goes through, comes back. The faster that it comes back, the leaner you are. Okay? And the slower that it comes back, the higher your body fat percentage is going to be. Fat is an insulator. Okay? Insulation obviously doesn't allow electrical current as well as a muscle would. So that's how bioelectrical impedance works. Those are just a couple of ways you can measure body composition. Flexibility, for the sake of this class, is a sit and reach test. Where basically you just sit down, put your feet on the ground. I've got a video attached to one of your assignments that will show you exactly how a sit and reach test works. But it measures hamstring flexibility for the most part. You stick your hands out without bending your legs. You may have done it in elementary school, but you can watch that video to see that. Muscle strength, a max lift test, like I talked about the bench press. And you could do any lift. Okay, it could be a curl, it could be a squat, it could be a shoulder press, it could be whatever you want it to be. But just how much weight can I lift one time? Muscle endurance, a sit-up test or a pull-up test. For the sake of this class and assignment that I posted, it's a sit-up test. So, and you may have done this in elementary school. How many sit-ups can you do in a minute? Okay, that's a muscle endurance test. All right, and then a cardiorespiratory endurance test. For example, what have we done in class on a weekly basis that's a good cardiorespiratory endurance test? A pacer test. Okay, so that tells you how efficient you are. If you don't make the beep, you're not as efficient as someone who does make the beep. And of course, the longer you go, the more efficient you are. A mile run test can work for that too. Again, for the assignment that I've given you, the fitness testing little project, it's a 1.5 mile run walk test. So I complete a 1.5 miles. How long does it take me? Obviously, the faster that I complete it, the better my level of cardiorespiratory endurance. So just talk a little bit about that assignment while we're on here. If you go over into Google Classroom, you click on the assignments, it's the fitness testing assignment. It just lists each of these components, a way to measure them, all right, and you just complete those, record your score. You can look at the scale, and you'll find where you fall in terms of poor, good, very good, great, okay, depending on your age, your gender, and obviously your score for each test. So just complete those, and then you'll see at the very bottom, what did you learn from this? What would you say your current level of physical fitness is? And then what can I do to improve it? It's very, very simple. And if you have any questions about any of those activities or want to try to substitute anything, just shoot me an email and I can answer those questions. Let's see. So there's 2 types of exercise. We talked about this maybe briefly, but aerobic and anaerobic, okay? And aero, A-E-R-O, is just, that means air, oxygen, okay? So an aerobic activity is an activity or an exercise that uses oxygen for fuel, okay? So it's a vigorous activity where oxygen is continuously taken in. The body uses the oxygen to create some energy. You'll talk more about that ATP process in biology class. We won't break that down into detail. But if I'm constantly breathing in oxygen and using it to convert to energy for that activity, that's an aerobic activity. An anaerobic activity, so an would mean without, so without air, without oxygen. It is a activity that usually consists of short bursts of activity that the body is relying on other sources of energy outside of oxygen. Okay, so just a couple of examples. If again I go to that 1.5 mile run test, or if I wanted to extend that out any further, that would be an aerobic activity. Okay, because at some point we talked about carbs. The first thing your body's going to go to is carbs. I'm going to burn all those off, and then I'm going to have to rely on oxygen for fuel. So if I'm doing any type of short burst activity, my body goes to that carbohydrate and it doesn't have to get to my oxygen and fat reserve, so it's not an aerobic activity. So for example, a 100-yard dash sprint, that would be an anaerobic activity. Okay, a weightlifting, an anaerobic activity, because it's a short burst, then a rest, then a short burst, then a rest. If it's a constant, then it's going to be aerobic. So again, if I'm running 3 miles, that's an aerobic activity. Okay, so the two differences, two different exercises. You got aerobic, you got anaerobic. Okay, just understand the basic difference between those two. I'm not going to walk through this on the video. If anybody has any questions, I can shoot a video if anyone requests it. But it talks about target heart rate, and it shows you here that the steps on the slide. Just subtract your age from 220, that finds your max heart rate. Then you're just going to multiply your max heart rate by 85% and 65%, and that gives you two numbers. That's where we get range in. So you're going to have two numbers. And what a target heart rate range is it just tells you if I'm exercising at the appropriate level, and if I want to gain a cardiorespiratory benefit from my exercise, I've got to fall in the range. So you've got your two numbers. Let's say that they were 125 and 175. Okay, so while I am exercising, so let's say you're doing your 1.5 mile run test. In the middle of that exercise, if I take my pulse, if I want to see a benefit or a gain from the activity, if the activity is going to be beneficial, my heart rate needs to fall between 125 and 175. That tells me I'm working at a level that will produce a gain. Okay, I will see a benefit. If I were to go halfway, say between, or even right at the finish of my 1.5 mile test, I measure my pulse and it was, say, 115. I'm not working hard enough. I'm not really going to see a benefit or a gain from the activity, from the 1.5 mile run. My times aren't going to get any faster. My cardiorespiratory level is not going to improve. Okay, and if I go on the other end, let's say it's a 190, then I'm working a little hard. Okay, and what I'm doing when my number is above my target heart rate range is I'm increasing the chance that I may have an injury. Okay, so for the short term, not that big a deal if you're working hard, but if you're pushing yourself for an extended period of time above your target heart rate range, your chance of injury goes way up. So it's one of the best ways to measure how effective my workout's going to be. Because if I'm not in that target heart rate range, I don't want to go as far as saying you're wasting time, but you're not going to see much of a benefit or much of a gain. Sure, you'll burn a few calories, but your cardiorespiratory endurance level is not going to go up. Your times aren't going to improve, and you're not going to see the kind of gain that you would if your heart rate fell within that range, if that makes sense. So let's see here. Let's talk about the 3 principles of exercise, and then a couple more things before we shut it down here. So when you're talking about putting a workout together, okay, I've got to follow the 3 principles of exercise. And this is a decent sized portion of the test that you're going to take next week. But the first principle is the principle of overload. Okay, and these principles sound somewhat complex, but really they're not. They're very simple. It's the principle of overload, which just says basically you have to work the body harder than it's normally worked. Okay, if you're doing what your body is already used to doing, then you're not going to see a gain. So the easiest thing to think about, I think, is going to the weight room. Let's think about the weight room. Okay, I've got to increase my number of reps or increase my number of sets if I want to see a gain. I've got to push my muscles, push my body harder than it's used to working. So for example, if I go into the weight room and I do 3 sets of 10, and I continue to do 3 sets of 10 for 6 weeks throughout my program, I'm not going to see a gain because I'm not pushing my body harder. Okay, so the whole concept of the principle overload is I've got to push my body harder. I've got to run faster, run harder. I've got to increase weight. I've got to do something to create some type of overload that my body is not used to, so I see a gain. The second principle is the principle of progression, okay? Which just means overload can't be a one-time thing. It's got to be a gradual increase in overload across the length of the workout plan that you have if I want to see a gain. So again, if I lift the same amount of weight for an extended period of time, I'm not going to be able to lift more weight. I can't go into the weight room and lift 135 pounds, regardless of what activity it is, do it for 6 weeks, and then come back and expect to be able to lift 200 pounds. It's not going to happen. I've got to have overload, and then I've got to progress in that overload. I can't just overload on week 1 and week 2 and then stay at week 2 for the next 6 weeks. I've got to overload in the process. I had an old football coach when I was in high school that used to say, if you can do it for 10, don't do it again. And all that is talking about is the principle of overload and progression. I have to constantly be increasing the overload over a period of time if I want to see a gain. And then the third principle is very simple. It's the principle of specificity. And that seems like a long word, but it's just an extension of the word specific. And all it means is you have a goal with the plan that you've put into place. Okay, so let's say, for example, I want to get my legs stronger. That's the emphasis of my weight training program. I want to get my legs stronger so I can run faster. Okay? So if I go into the weight room and all I do is curls, shoulder presses, and bench press, my plan makes no sense because my goal was to get my legs stronger so I can run faster. Well, I'm lifting bench press, which is chest, curls, which is biceps, and shoulder press, which is shoulders and back. It's not going to help me get my legs stronger. So the principle of specificity just means particular exercises improve particular areas of fitness. Go to a basketball court and think about if I want to improve free throws. My free throws are awful, and I want to improve my free throws. But every day at basketball practice, all I do is shoot three-pointers. Your free throws aren't going to get any better because if I want to improve free throws, guess what? I shoot free throws. If I want to improve three-pointers, then I'm going to shoot three-pointers. But I can't do one and expect the other to improve. The same applies to a workout plan. Okay, so again, the three principles: principle of overload, principle of progression, principle of specificity. Real simple. Okay, and then let's see here. One last thing, the FIT principle. So a workout program has to follow the FIT principle as well, and that's F-I-T-T. Okay, F-I-T-T. The F just stands for frequency. How often are you going to do the activity? So when you start to put together a plan, a workout plan for yourself, you got to ask yourself these questions. And they all should support the goal that you've established prior to looking at the weight program, okay? Why do I want to work out? Answer that question. And then when I work out, what do I do to accomplish the why of what I want to work out? So the F is frequency. How often am I going to do the activity? Okay? That's going to be determined by the type of activity, which we'll talk about in a minute. But frequency is how often. Intensity, how hard am I going to work? Again, think target heart rate range. Okay, how hard am I going to work at the activity? T, the first T, is time. How much time do I devote to the workout? Okay, if it's aerobic activity, then 20 to 30 minutes minimum. Because anything prior to that, I'm going to be burning carbs. I want to get into my fat stores, and that's going to be aerobic. It's going to take 20 or 30 minutes to do that, okay? If it's an anaerobic workout, it may be a little shorter. Okay, I'm not going to do sprint work for an hour and a half. I'm not going to do it. So time plays a role. And then the last T is type. And that's just, is this going to be aerobic? Is it going to be anaerobic? And that's going to determine a lot of the other things. What's the frequency? For example, if I go to a weight room, I'm not lifting the same muscles every day. Can I lift weights every day? Sure. But I can't lift the same muscles every day because I'm contradicting what I'm trying to do. I'm breaking my muscles down. I don't give them time to repair. All I'm doing is breaking down. I see no gain. Okay? If I'm doing aerobic activity, I could if I wanted to do something every day. I would recommend at least a couple of rest days during the week, so you're just not breaking down your body. But you can do more frequency than you can if you're doing weights. Intensity, again, what are you trying to accomplish? You know, the harder I go, the more calories I'm going to burn. But I also need to stay in a safe range and not risk injury. And then again, so it's frequency, intensity, time, and type. Those are the four parts of the FIT principle. So those are just some basics of the principles, the basic components of fitness. And we could talk a little bit more about those, but there's no need to do that considering the situation that we're in now. So I'll post a test next week. We'll talk some more about some skill-related fitness next week, and then we'll kind of combine those and do a short test. But you've just got a few activities and assignments this week. I think they're pretty self-explanatory. If anybody's got any questions, let me know. There's an article that I've posted that you can click the link to. You just read it, answer some questions I've done a better job this week, I hope, of creating Google Docs so you don't have to request access. You should be able to type those answers in. What else? Let's see. What else do you got here? You got a target heart rate worksheet. We talked about target heart rate. I know I didn't go over the basics, but you'll see on the worksheet how to do it, and I just want you to be able to do it because on the test I think you're going to have to work an example and to be able to complete that for a target heart rate. And then there's a fitness testing project. If anybody wants to take that on for an extra grade, you can. Just list different tests. You take them, record your scores, and then talk about your scores. And then again, there's a physical activity quiz this week. Just, hey, multiple times, at least twice this week, did you walk or do some kind of physical activity for at least 15 minutes? Very simple. So I hope that helps you guys out. I hope everybody's staying safe. And if you get any questions about anything, just feel free to shoot me an email. You can text or call me, 931-337-9721. And again, I hope we get to see you guys back in school soon.